Hello, and welcome to our presentation entitled Raising Engagement in Large Classes, Results from a Multidisciplinary Faculty Learning Community Study. My name is Dora Cavallo-Medved, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues David Andrews and Judy Bornier. In addition to Dave and Judy, the other co-authors for this presentation include Jacqueline Stagner, Don Bourne, Mark Lubrick, Clayton Smith, Danielle Soulier, and Melanie Reno, all of us from the University of Windsor. We'll begin the presentation with a short introduction to faculty learning communities. They are essentially a group of cross-disciplinary faculty who are actively engaged in a collaborative program to support each other's professional development. FLCs can be categorized as either cohort-based or topic-based. In our case, our FLC is a topic-based one that is focused on teaching and engaging students in large classes. We built our FLC at the University of Windsor in 2018, and it encompasses 8 faculty members spanning various disciplines across our campus, including science, human kinetics, nursing, arts, humanities, and social sciences, engineering, and education. In addition, we have a student researcher that is also part of our group. As an FLC, we are focused on exploring and identifying ways in which we could better engage students in large classes. As such, we have created several different engagement activities, all with real-world applications that we've been able to test directly in our classrooms. In addition, we've designed and conducted student feedback on the engagement levels within each of these activities. The activities that we've designed, we've been able to test in 2 large first-year courses, Functional Anatomy and Cell Biology. Both of these courses have students of over 200 or more, and both are similar in scope and content. The engagement activities that we've designed include those that are individual as well as group-based, with and without technology. We've tested these activities across 4 classes within each of those courses. Each of those activities were tested twice, once at the beginning of class and once at the end, and also include reflections from both the instructors as well as faculty peer observers. We've also conducted student surveys, which measure the level of student engagement and enjoyment with each of those activities, how much students were distracted during those activities, their level of understanding of course content following those activities, how often students like to have those activities conducted in the classroom, and finally, the student level of confidence in being able to apply course content in a real-world application following those activities. For the purpose of today's presentation, we're going to focus on the 4 features that are highlighted here. Again, those engagement activities, as mentioned, fall into one of the 4 categories. In the first categories, students are considered individual without the use of technology, as they simply listen to a lecture that is being delivered by the instructor. In the second scenario, students are grouped together without the use of technology and are asked to conduct one of the following: discuss solutions to real-world scenarios, develop mnemonics for anatomical structures, or create multiple choice questions. In the third scenario, students are asked to work individually with the use of technology, either participating in an online Kahoot gaming system or answering Mentimeter questions. And finally, in the fourth scenario, the students are put together into groups and with the use of technology are asked to either research solutions to real-world scenarios, problem solve, or create questions. In the next few slides, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Dave, who's going to talk about the student results from those surveys.
Thank you very much, Dora. For level of engagement, there was a significant interaction between the type of activities, individual or group, and whether technology was used or not. More specifically, the level of engagement reported by students for group activities was significantly greater than individual activities when no technology was used. A similar finding for both courses. Comparatively, okay, the level of engagement reported by students for individual activities when technology was used was significantly greater than group activities. So contrary to what was found when no technology was used. This result was also similar between the two courses. Last, the level of engagement reported by students for individual activities when technology was being used was significantly greater than individual activities when no technology was being used. So although the overall response is very similar for level of engagement between the two courses, we did find that there was quite a bit of variability in the level of engagement reported by students in the different conditions. Okay, and that is reflective of the different activities in those conditions. So the last point to note here is that the lowest level of engagement reported by students occurred in the individual activities with no technology. So the traditional lecture, okay, where no additional activities were presented to students. And that's interesting because what it shows here is that just by adding any kind of activity to engage students resulted in a higher level of engagement reported by students. So doing something, okay, is better for engagement than doing nothing at all. For distraction, the greatest proportion of students who reported being distracted occurred during individual activities when no technology was being used, okay? And that was significantly different than group activities when no technology was being used. Again, a comparable result between the two courses. When technology was being used, however, there was the proportion of students who reported being distracted was very similar between the individual and group activities, okay, for both courses. The greatest proportion of students who reported being distracted occurred in the individual activities, no technology condition. So that was the traditional lecture course, which is really interesting when you consider the last slide. We found that the lowest level of engagement reported by students also occurred in that condition. But that makes sense because having more students distracted would result likely in a lower level of engagement reported by students. When you collapse across the course and whether technology was used or not, students reported a level of understanding of course material to a higher level during individual activities than group activities, although the overall means were very close in size. Notice the very limited variability about those means. When collapsed across types of activity and whether technology was used or not, students in the biology course, on average, reported a higher level of understanding of the course material than students in the anatomy course. And again, that is likely due to the types of activities that were presented in each. And last, for the level of confidence that students had in applying the material to real-world scenarios, you'll notice that the level of confidence reported by students was significantly greater for group activities than individual activities when no technology was used. This was a similar finding to what was found for the biology course. Okay. A similar response or a consistent response was also found for when technology was used in the biology course. Okay, so overall in those cases, in those conditions, group activity, the level of confidence reported by students during group activities was significantly greater than during individual activities, regardless of whether technology was used or not. And that makes some sense when you think about that these were first year students for the most part. So the introductory course, they're going to feel more confident when applying the material to real-world scenarios when they are part of a group and not having to respond only on their own. We expect that if this was the study was to be done with more senior students and upper year courses, that the level of confidence for application would be higher in general than what we see here for these introductory courses. And the last point to raise here is that the level of confidence seen for both individual and group activities when technology was being used were significantly greater than when no technology was being used. Okay, so in the anatomy course. And that's an interesting finding because it is different than for the biology course. And I think the reason for that is that up until this point in the study, literally no technology was used in the anatomy course. So when it was present, when it was available, the students really felt more confident when they were able to use it. We also collected some reflections from instructors and observers about their experience in the classes when the testing was done, because none of us had experienced this kind of testing before. And what the instructors reported was that putting the description of the testing procedures, the announcement about the study, and a statement about consent, putting those up on the screen for the students to read during class time was hugely important and saved a lot of time. It also helped to focus the students on what to do when they had to fill out the surveys. Instructors also reflected on how important it was that they had both observers and graduate assistants in the classes to help manage the testing. Them being there made it possible to actually conduct the survey in the limited time that was available during the class. Instructors also found that students appeared to be keener to do the survey on the first session versus the fourth session. So there was some test fatigue that they noticed. So it became really important to continue to describe to the students what the experimental design was, that this was happening over a number of sessions, and how important it was to continue their participation if they so chose. For the observers, again, they reported the importance of good communication and organization of the surveys and the bubble sheets, which was consistent with what the instructors indicated. They also thought anecdotally that they saw that more students were eager to report on the surveys and participate when the instructors had thanked them for doing so in previous sessions. And lastly, observers felt that it was really important for them to be there in the entire class to observe the impact of the engagement activities and response of students after the engagement activities had been conducted. So those are the basic results, and now on to passing it along to Judy to summarize the study and provide some closing thoughts.
So thanks, Dave. I'm now going to have a chance to summarize some of our findings. So the first thing that we want you to take away is that students preferred engagement activities over traditional lectures, and it really didn't matter whether or not technology was used or not. Having students engaged in activities really reduced distractions. It supported their understanding of course material, and it helped increase their confidence in applying what they were learning to the real world setting. It's important that we remember that activities need to be authentic and that it's really helpful to vary them throughout the semester. But as an instructor, your comfort level with the engagement activities is really important. And so with that, we thought we'd leave you with a couple tips that we think will be helpful. The first one is that preparation is key. Effective engagement, just like effective teaching, really requires preparation. Attending conferences like this one as an instructor, you'll get great ideas through STLE and different conference presentations, but also delving into some of the literature on SOTL and how we can engage our students is a really great place to research ideas. Then try and figure out how will that engagement activity help me accomplish those learning objectives that I have, and thinking through how will I implement those in my class. Another really great idea or tip is to involve former students in testing your new ideas. So if we think of students as our partners in our teaching and learning, they can really be helpful both in informing us of, are instructions clear? How did this go? And they can help us with sort of that dry run to be able to see whether or not what we're explaining and what we're doing makes sense to them. Involving our teaching assistants can also be really helpful. So making sure that we communicate the objectives and goals to them, that they're on board and that they've bought in, and also to be able to make sure that our instructions to them are clear if they're involved in the activity, and listen to their feedback and ideas. Remember, most of our teaching students haven't been out of our classroom for that long, and their ideas and tips can be super helpful. From the student perspective, we need to make sure that we're providing clear expectations and instructions. I'm sure, like many of you, you've had great ideas like I have, and then you go to explain them and students are left sort of looking at you, staring at you with blank faces because they're not really clear on what you said. So make sure that you've had a chance to think through what your expectations are and the instructions of how they need to engage in that activity and what they need to do. It can also be really helpful to give students tips on how to be engaged. So for example, if they don't have their cell phone with them, they may be less likely to check what their phone's saying when there is a little warning that tells them that they've got a new Facebook post or Instagram or TikTok. The other idea would be to explain to them the importance of being engaged. And then at all processes throughout your teaching, it's helpful to get student feedback. They really are so willing to provide both positive and constructive feedback and help us to enhance what we're doing and the instructions and engagement activities that we provide them. Our next tip involves connecting and engaging with the students. So teaching large classes presents both new challenges and new opportunities. But really what we want you to be able to think about is that engagement requires us to connect with our students and that they need to buy in and understand that this is really intended to help them. So connecting it to the real world, explaining to them the relevance and how this impacts them and how it impacts what they're learning and what they might want to do in the future. And basically, the summary is, why does this matter to them? So that part becomes really important. If they understand both what they're learning and why it matters, but also the engagement and why it's helpful for them in their learning, that can be super helpful in order to help them buy in. Ask them. So as we mentioned in the previous slide, their opinions and feedback can be really valued and make a difference in how we teach. But as individuals, we all like to feel valued, and students, knowing that you care and that you're asking their feedback, will feel like they can contribute, and that is really important as well. The next thing is you need to be you. So what might work in my class may not work in Dave or Dora's class, and things that I've seen Dave and Dora do may not work for me. So part of trying to determine how you're going to engage your students really is about being real with who you are and what you're comfortable with, and also how you can best connect with those students. So if you're not comfortable with technology, maybe that's not the best approach to be able to incorporate in the engagement activities, because there are other ways you can engage your students that don't involve technology, pardon me. The third tip is to mix it up and find the balance. So what we found is that if you continue to do the same engagement activity, the attention and the excitement of it sort of dwindles after time. So if you provide the right variety, sort of the spice of life, and determine the right balance, it really is helpful for both you to keep it fresh for you, but also for the students. So think about the different ways that you can mix things up. It might be an engaging lecture, talking about that sort of experience of the students and connecting it to something that they know. It could be that you want to incorporate videos, or you want to do some of the gaming, or you want to do some live demonstrations, or maybe it's that you want to incorporate group discussions and self-assessment. So think about, as you're planning out your course, how can I engage the students and how can I mix up the ways that I keep them engaged and interested? And the bottom line for all of us is, the more we can try and engage students, involve them as students, as partners in their learning, and engage them in both the learning and the application of that, the better it will be not only for the students, but also for ourselves in teaching and to advance what it is that they're going to take away and remember afterwards. And so at that, we'd like to thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope that you're enjoying the online virtual conference with us. Take care.